Directed by Edgar Wright and starring Glen Powell, The Running Man has been remade for a 2025 audience. The cheesy one-liners and colourful characters have been toned down to focus on the dystopian world that this dangerous game show inhabits. And we do not agree on this one at all. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast, and today we're looking at a brand new release for the third week in a row. They're spoiling us in November, but we're once again looking at a new film, and that is the new version of The Running Man, directed by Edgar Wright. Obviously, this is a new version based on... I mean, I guess it's a remake, but technically it's not a remake. It's another adaptation of the same source material, but whatever. That's splitting hairs.
Yeah.
You know, same material, same thing. You know what I mean?
It only becomes a remake when the original is notable enough that it enters the public consciousness. Then it's like, oh, well, you're remaking that beloved film rather than you're just adapting the same thing over again.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that, because that would suggest that the original Running Man's not a beloved film.
No, I'm saying it is a remake. I agree. It is a remake.
Right. Because I'm just saying, like, you know, like, would you count Batman Begins a remake of Batman 89? I don't think you would.
Oh, no, but that's a different storyline altogether.
Yeah.
Like, that's doing different stories.
This is following the basic... premise the same, even if there's a lot of differences. Although, for all I know, this may be a lot more accurate to the book. I've never read the book by Stephen King, but...
based off of everything I've read, the original... Was it 90s or 80s? I always say 80s.
80s, says 80s. 87.
The original 80s one was vastly different from the book. This one is much closer, all things considered.
Interesting.
There are changes still, but it's a lot more in line with what the original one was.
Okay. So this one stars Glen Powell as Ben Richards, so the character's name is the same as the Arnold version from 87. And there is a game show, there is a competition, but the way the competition plays out is a little bit different, of course, than in that movie. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get into it, but we will start spoiler-free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into spoilers. And if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button, or you can give us 5 stars in your podcast app of choice. And if you want to support the show, you can do that over at Patreon or YouTube membership and get some bonuses, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So yeah, the premise of The Running Man is that we're in kind of a dystopian future where things are heavily controlled by the corporations, specifically the TV networks. And they're kind of the OCP, if you will, of this universe, who are in charge of everything. And lots of people are poor, and the main character has a sick daughter. He's struggling for work. He's been blacklisted from all the normal jobs because he dared to talk to a union at one point. And as a result, he's left with no other option than to go into the super predatory game shows circuit. And the most dangerous of them all, the one that no one has ever really won, is The Running Man, where he will be hunted for up to 30 days if he makes it that long, and try to survive to win a lot of money for himself, or if he dies somewhere in the middle, at least for his family, and he'll just be dead, because that's how death works. I don't know why I'm explaining that part, but that's the basic
sci-fi,
premise.
anything could change.
So that's the basic premise. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a dystopian future. There is some technology here or there. It's got some visuals that are very sci-fi, but it's not like overly like dependent on them for the most part. There's the odd super fancy drone or whatever, or things like that, but
yeah, I do like how it is not specifically tied down to a given year, because apparently the original book released in 82 was set in 2025, so we caught up with it. But yeah, this obviously is just kind of that nebulous future that it feels like we're hurtling towards in various different means.
I want to say the original movie was set in like 2019, something around there.
I believe it was 2017.
Oh yeah, it was something that it was in that range. And I remember when I did it with Tara on the show, I remember thinking, oh, we have just passed this year, whatever it was. So so just interesting that this is kind of lined up. I don't think that's why they made it for this year. I think that is just a coincidence, but
probably
here we are. So yeah, and it's Edgar Wright who, I went into this with really interesting kind of expectations, I would say, because Edgar Wright has made one of my favorite comedies of all time, that being Hot Fuzz. In fact, Male Fuzz movies, slightly related name-wise to it. Shaun of the Dead's also great, but World's End's a bit weaker than those two. Not bad, but definitely a bit weaker. And then Baby Driver, Last Night in Soho, and then going into this, it's like, well, I've not really liked anything he's made that much since 2007. That's actually quite a big span of time where I've not been enthusiastic about stuff. So what am I going to feel about this? And it's also kind of a remake of a movie that I already like a lot, right? And obviously the original Running Man's not high art. It's a cheesy 80s sci-fi action movie with one-liners and goofy villains and all the rest of it, but it's very good at what it is. And it's I grew up with it, so I've got a lot of attachment and nostalgia with it. So, you know, it was an interesting deck being stacked against Edgar Wright with this one. I wasn't really sure how to feel going in, and like I don't even know what my expectations were. I was kind of just a blank slate where I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this. I'm just going to go in and hope for the best. Was kind of my ways.
It's weird because mentally for me, I haven't seen Baby Driver and I haven't seen Last Night in Soho. So the last thing that I really was exposed to was World's End, and I'm probably more recently than that was Scott Pilgrim. I probably watched those.
Oh, I forgot about Scott Pilgrim. I missed that one. But yeah, I don't like that much movie very much. Now, to be fair, I'm in the minority. People love that movie. It's not for me. It's not my thing. Right.
And that's the thing is I would say I do actually like Scott Pilgrim more than I dislike it. So I wasn't as hard on Edgar Wright, but the thing is I almost went into this movie not even knowing it was him. Like, it was only as I was going to buy tickets, I'm like, oh, hey, Edgar Wright, that's crazy. Like, so I almost didn't know, but I have a similar feeling to you of going in. I wasn't sure what kind of film I was going to expect from this. And it wasn't so much of his history. I was kind of expecting the Edgar Wright film to be in the same sort of vein as what I imagine and have seen clips of Baby Driver to being. What I remember, like, sort of the Shaun of the Dead trilogy, whatever that is, the Cornetto
trilogy, yes.
Yep. Whatever that was. I was expecting that tone. But then the trailers are telling me this is just a run-of-the-mill action movie. This is just going to be that sort of run and gun, over-the-top action, nonstop sort of stuff. So I guess I went in with slightly conflicting just because I had not yet seen Edgar Wright do that yet. I hadn't seen him do just a constant blockbuster action nonstop movie.
Also, I love that Americans only know the word Cornetto because of the Cornetto trilogy. It's funny to me. It's just a brand of ice cream cone you can buy.
It's the equivalent of calling it the Hershey trilogy. Yeah. Like, we don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, no, I mean, because I guess you're going to know how much of an Edgar Wright movie is this going to feel like? Because in my head, I've got what that feels like. Although, to be fair, his last 2 or 3 movies haven't really felt all that Edgar Wright, and that's part of the weird problem. And it does make you wonder how much of like that Cornetto trilogy, how much of that is because Simon Pegg co-wrote all those movies with him. Like, how much of that is that a factor? Scott Pilgrim's a weird case where it's an adaptation and it's, I think, very close to what the material was, so a lot of the character probably comes from that. But his last 2 movies, Last Night in Soho and Baby Driver, I don't think they're based on anything. I could be wrong.
Not as far as I'm aware. Yeah. I mean, nothing significant, at least.
And I think because there's some good direction in them. I mean, Baby Driver has some really nice practical driving sequences, but story-wise and character-wise, I thought it was a complete dud. So, yeah, anyway, all that said, come out of this one, not really knowing what to expect. I did kind of glance at the reviews, and when I say glance, I looked at the Rotten Tomato score. That was it. So I saw that number, but that was all I really knew going in. But with all that out of the way, David, what did you think of The Running Man?
So, slight spoilers for my thoughts on the 80s Running Man. You already said that, you really liked that one.
Yeah.
I went back. I didn't rewatch the movie, but I did go back to when I did my homework on that. And I looked at what my thoughts particularly there were.
So it wasn't that long ago, all things considered.
No, it was when we did Mad Max Fury Road.
Okay.
So, maybe like a year and a half ago. But it was... The big thing that I was coming out at is that it was very over the top, very campy. It felt like it was built to give Arnold Schwarzenegger one-liners the whole way through.
Sub-Zero, now, Plane Zero. Yeah.
Yeah. The bit that I feel really resonates with this movie, though, is that I said I didn't feel like the 80s movie went as deep into like the socio-political stuff of this dystopia, the idea that what is the world like for the average person, and like what's going on there in this world that is owned by corporations, that the media is being used in this way to rile people up, get them angry, and do that stuff. That's all this movie is. That is the ground floor of this movie, is let's take a look at what the world is like as we're doing that. And through that lens, I really like this movie. I really like the way that it's analyzing this stuff, the way it's going through. It feels like it's coming into this and actually has something to say on top of being just this run and gun action movie. So like as I'm sitting there, it hits the third act and we go through like the big messages and stuff like that. I think it's solid messaging here, and I really appreciate what it's doing, to the point where, without spoiling too much, I'm kind of shocked that like Hollywood as a whole let them get away with saying as much as they did, because it's like almost bordering on a call for violence at a certain point. But regardless, they did what they did, and I really like it. However, the downsides come in a lot of the pacing issues. I feel like a lot of the things that like it was setting up, a lot of the things that it was doing, I kept expecting to come back and have some sort of payoff. But this is told a lot more like I would imagine the book to be told, a bit more of an anthology where our main characters kind of drifting through different areas, meeting different characters, and it's a good way to show the world, but it doesn't result in a lot of payoff in the end for those characters. It's more so for the storyline as a whole. And then again, without spoiling too much, I think the very, very end of the movie, it's missing something. I can't say specifically what without too much going into spoilers, but there's something missing there that I think is detracting from an emotional or proper ending here. So it's a bit of a give and take. There's aspects I really like, aspects I think fall flat, but overall, I think I do come out on this more positive than negative.
That was a complex answer.
Thank you.
If nothing else. Yeah, I'm pretty middling on this.
Okay.
I didn't really like it, and it's not that it's not shooting for some things that I, in theory, like. I think there's just a lot of stuff in here that I can see what it's supposed to be or feel like, and it just doesn't quite hit it. It doesn't quite, like, I never quite felt for the main character or his family, which is obviously a big emotional kind of like cornerstone of the movie. I thought that felt very rushed and undercooked. I think some of the tricks it plays throughout actually go against me actively caring about what's happening. It kind of makes you question certain things in a way that I don't think makes tension. It just made me go, well, why am I taking any of this at face value now? I don't know. Like it kind of like it bluffed me a little bit too much in a way. And then yeah, there are some pacing issues, and I think the big thing for me, maybe more than anything else, is tonally this movie is kind of all over the place. It's like it wants to be a lighthearted comedy at points and have him be wisecracking and do these little things that are crowd-pleasing moments, and then there's times where it wants to do like a dark science fiction moment where a character says something or does something, and it's like, this is actually so dark and it should feel cerebral, it should feel like it's like cutting into my soul, but I just can't feel that because 2 minutes ago he was flipping people off and doing whatever else. Like it feels like tonally it's just jumping all over the place. It's like parts of it want to be an Edgar Wright movie, parts of it want to be faithful to the book, parts of it want to be like something that an audience who likes to go see Chris Pratt would go and enjoy, right? Parts of it feel like that's what it wants to be.
Oh, the dredges of society.
Yes,
got it.
The dredges, yes, right. And it's just so over the it's so all over the place with that I had this sort of disconnect to it the entire time. There's definitely characters that I just straight up didn't like. I won't say anything about what the character is, but Michael Cera's character, like I basically disliked that entire segment of the movie.
Oh, I'll fight you on that.
No, bad comedy did not work for me. It just pulled me out of things. I was just waiting for it to end at that point. And on the ending, which you said was lacking something, I hate the ending. I straight up think the last 10 minutes are the worst part of this movie. I think it pulls some things that are really weird where it makes you... It wants you to question something. Is this a thing or isn't it? And I honestly don't think it added to tension. It just made me go, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling here. I'm just... I don't feel anything for what's going on because I just don't really believe anything. And I think it wants you to feel conflicted in a sort of like tense way about that. Like you're dramatically invested and you're like, oh my God, did this thing really happen or didn't it? And all I could think was, I don't really care that much, but everything's hinging on this idea of me caring whether or not A thing happened or B thing happened. And then the way it actually wraps it all up in the last like 2-3 minutes, I think is a complete dud. Like, I think the way it does the last 3 minutes of this movie is such a wet fart of an ending that I up until that point, up until the last 10 minutes, I was like, okay, this isn't really working for me. It's, you know, it's hovering in this sort of range score wise. And then the last 10 minutes made me go, oh, that's like another 1.5, 2 points maybe even docked off the top. Like I actually am annoyed at this ending for like just, and it's not even so much that it does something offensive or anything like that, or it does something that's like so bad it's like disastrous. It's just so poor in its construction and how much impact it has because of how it chooses to finish up its story, how it chooses to convey. That's because it's effectively a character just comes on the screen and starts telling you, hey, this is the things you should be thinking about. And as soon as that started happening, I was like, this sucks. I hate this.
So again, without spoiling anything going into it, the moment right before the character comes in is where the book ends. The book stops it right then and there.
Kind of. I think there's a slight difference from what I wrote, because there's only one thing I know about the book, and I think it's changed there slightly. But we'll talk about that in spoilers. We'll talk about that in spoilers.
It's best of my stuff. But yeah, that I agree with you that I think, I was being a bit diplomatic there with the ending before we got into spoilers. But yes, I agree with you that I think the ending is mishandled, because while I do appreciate the message, I do like what they're trying to say there, it is so mismanaged. And I think that especially when you have the comparison point of the previous movie, which maybe didn't handle it perfectly, but had a much stronger ending, had a much more emotionally resonant ending. It's like this one's just going to come off as weaker. That didn't need to happen. I think that there's ways they could have made it work, but this one, the way that it happened, it didn't hit with that same punch the same way the other one did, or probably even the book, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I'm talking about the ending not working, I'm not even comparing it, because to me, as much as they've both got a Ben Richards and there's both a TV show called The Running Man, they're so different in what they're actually doing that I can't even really feel like I need to compare them or say, oh, one does this better than the other. They're just very different beasts. Like, the 87 Running Man is this great cheesy time with Arnold, one-liners, they're going through arenas with these like colourful gladiator-style villains coming after them. And that was a video game. Yeah, and that was something that, like, am I going to be missing the charm of that? And it's going for something so different. I don't know if I was missing it per se. The only time it sort of popped out in my head, oh, something's missing here compared to the original, is when it showed the hunters lined up and walking towards the camera. I went, oh, these are all just dudes dressed in black. This is boring as shit. Where's my Christmas tree looking dude? Where's my ice hockey guy?
This is what Bryan Singer did to the X-Men, where it's like, oh, look at all these colorful characters. Oh, nope, black latex. All right, perfect. Yeah,
one guy has blonde hair. That's his like signifying feature.
One guy has blonde hair, and then like the leader is always wearing a mask.
Yes,
but the other ones that all kind of just come in and lead the story at the same times. Yeah, nothing identifying.
Absolute red shirts. Yeah, so I think I wouldn't even, so when I say I wouldn't want to compare it to the original, because I just don't even think it's a valid comparison, bizarrely, because it's like they're so different, is that when I think of the end of this movie falling so flat, I'm thinking more of just other serious sci-fi movies, I guess, like other movies that have, some kind of similar premise or that are going for a harder hitting ending in some way, right? I just don't think this measures up to, well, a good movie, basically, to put it in as simple a terms as possible. I cannot tell you how much there was this like moment where I'm sure if you had a camera on my face as like these things were playing out at the ending, I'm sure there's a moment where my face just kind of dropped and I went, oh, this is just shit now. Like, this is just turned to shit. Okay, this is what we're doing now.
I look, I hear what you're saying and I do see what you're saying. I don't feel nearly as strongly about it, and I think that the ending does not ruin what the message of the rest of the movie was for me, and that was something that was resonating so hard with me that I can't fault it as badly as you are here.
I mean, the message is fine, but I guess I just didn't really like a lot of the side characters that they were using to tell this message. Like, I get, like, on paper, I get the message because, like, it's a message that a lot of sci-fi movies like to have, right? It's not exactly unique in that sense, right? It's doing this, you know, simple enough, like, science fiction message about the poor versus the rich, the freedom versus the establishment, all that, you know, good stuff. And that's all perfectly fine. But the characters that he encounters, where we get some of those stories playing out very wildly, to where, like, Michael Cera's character, like, you know, as soon as he starts pumping his water gun, I'm like, piss off, movie. Like, okay. I'm not happy about this at all. Go away. I'm not laughing. It's not funny. Leave me alone.
Yeah. No, I'll agree. I think the Michael Cera character, it's basically a character in two parts. The first part, I think, is a fantastically written character. There is so much pathos and so much motivation all pumped into this character that, like, even with Glen Powell on screen, who by definition is the walking embodiment of charisma, as Michael Cera was giving his backstory, my eyes were glued to Michael Cera. Like, he was taking that scene away from me. But yes, the moment they get into, like, him pumping the water gun and everything that follows there, I'm like, why are we doing this? Why is this happening right now?
I don't know. Pathos is an interesting word when I feel like the movie just paused so he could give us a bunch of exposition. But you know what? It's fine. We can disagree on that.
Yeah.
But and for the record, I do like Glen Powell. I am a fan of Chad Radwell, which is the first character I ever saw him play on Scream Queens. He's a delight.
I tried pitching this to my wife. I was like, hey, do you want to come see this? It's got Glen Powell in it. And she's like, who? And I was like, I feel like you know him, but I don't know what you know him from. And I pulled up his IMDb profile. Now, I had never seen Scream Queens, but I also didn't know she had ever seen Scream Queens. Turns out she did. And she's like, oh, yeah, I know that guy from Scream Queens. She still didn't end up going with me, but regardless, she at least knew him.
I mean, I think she made the right choice in this case.
Yeah, probably.
But, you know, I don't know. Yeah, so, needless to say, didn't really like it very much.
All right.
I don't really like it.
I guess if you're looking for the show as a whole, the opinion would be mixed. But
yeah, but I feel like you're
negative for you.
Yeah, leaning more negative for me, leaning slightly positive for you. Because even like when it's setting all this stuff up at the start, and it's like, hey, he's lost his job, he's got a sick daughter. It felt like it was going through the motions. I felt like I'm like, okay, I've seen these parts play out so many times, and nothing about it was making me like connect with the character in any way that felt like more meaningful. And I don't know what it's missing. Like, I actually don't know how to diagnose it and say what is it missing here to make me care, because it's not like there's anything wrong with it on paper. It's just, you know, it's like, okay, he's like, you know, he's got the sick kid, the wife has to go work, and it's almost like it's just laying it on so thick where, like, oh, her job's a waitress, like some of the customers might expect, you know, her to be a prostitute, like they kind of imply that in the conversation, and they're laying it on so thick to a point where it's almost becoming cliche with the way it's laying it on. For me,
I disagree entirely, and I think that's kind of the reason why I was so into it, is that I recognize, obviously this is more, I don't want to say exaggerated, but it's in the future, the problems are worse. There's this very clear divide of like the rich and the poor, and like they live in the slums area, whereas the other ones live in what essentially looks like downtown Manhattan sort of thing. But as we moved through these characters and as we were moving through each of these here, while they aren't given a lot of depth immediately, what I immediately recognized was that all of the problems they're talking about are things that me and people around me and all the people that I've seen online immediately can relate to, in a way that I feel like this movie is playing a lot more straight and a lot less glossified than a lot of those other sci-fi movies do. I feel like so many of the other ones, it's like, oh yeah, you know, all this stuff is happening or whatever, but it's so future-fied. It's so much of a thing of like, there's like some mystery illness or whatever that has taken over the world or whatever, that sure, we can all relate to it from a post-pandemic standpoint, but it's still a vague sci-fi illness. This one's like, no, the daughter's sick with the flu and the drugs are really expensive. And it's like, yes, we all know what the flu is. We all know how expensive drugs are. And it's something that the movie keeps doing on, where it's relating things back so directly to what I think people actually go through. That's why the message was landing so well for me. I don't feel like it was ever a cliche in so much as life as a whole has become cliche at that point.
Now, I think you're too easily impressed here. I don't think the writing's good enough to earn any of what you're saying. I think that, yes, it's relatable, but I don't think relatable alone's enough to get points. I think it has to actually also do it in a compelling way that gets you engaged into the characters and makes you care. Like, I don't know. Yeah, like I want you to take this the wrong way, David, but it sounds like you've never watched a dystopian film before. And you're just like, wow, they're saying things that speak to me. Money issues, healthcare problems. I get this. They're speaking about my life.
I get what you're saying, but like every time that like most recently, I think dystopian wise, not most recent release, but one of the ones I watched most recently was Soylent Green. Was one of those ones that's, you know, it's older now. It's not something that's
from 1972, hot off the presses. But go on.
Yeah, like, you know, there's tons of other stuff that I've seen in the meantime, but that's, you know, that's one where it's the same sort of thing. There's this big company, there's widespread corruption, just stuff like that. But it always felt to me like there was still just a little bit of pulling punches, just a little bit where it's not saying the quiet part out loud. And that's where this movie, maybe I am too easily impressed, but I feel like this is one of the few times that I have actually.
That is a very interesting phrase you use there. Because I think that's part of my problem, is I don't like that they're just spelling it out. That's one of my big problems, is the amount of times characters in this movie just start saying exactly what the issues are. They just start explaining them to the audience. And like you were saying, it doesn't feel glossied up in a Hollywood way. And I kind of think I don't know, it's kind of, well, maybe it's not glossied up, but it feels like, I feel like a smart script is able to make it feel real, but imply a lot of the things without outright spelling them all out. And that's something that I think works better for me than characters who just literally just look straight into the camera and start explaining what the issues are. And I'm not just talking about the ending. I'm like this because part of the plot is that Ben has to record little vlogs and send them into the TV channel, so he has to do it every day or he gets disqualified. And some of them, not all of them, some of them are just stupid, but some of them, like, he does get kind of serious and starts talking about poor people in the city slums and all the rest of it. And like, usually whenever he started doing this, I was like, I genuinely thought the writing in this and the dialogue was subpar. Like, it was never, like, it was always getting in the way of me enjoying what the premise was. Always. And that goes for those characters. It goes, in fact, if there's one comparison point to the original that this movie is going to lose unconditionally, right? Hands down, this one loses. And this is nothing against the actor in this movie, because I like the actor in this movie. But Killian in the original is a phenomenal character. And Josh Brolin in this movie, bless him, he's trying, but the character has nothing on that original version.
I will say, you're right. However, the Killian of the previous movie is a merger of the host and the head of the network. Like, that's kind of, he's playing both at the same time. He
was both, yes. They split in two.
This one, it's split into two separate characters, and Josh Brolin is not the very charismatic host character. He is the executive that's kind of behind the scenes the whole time. So I agree with you. He is weaker, but he's also playing a very different character here.
Okay, well, yeah, but forget like the direct comparison between them in terms of like playing the same thing, and just put it this way: which movie has the better villain that you're rooting for the hero to like get in the end? Like, I think it's no question.
Yeah, that's if you're looking at it from the viewpoint of a single person to take down and say that that's what it is. But that's not what this movie's about. The villain is not this one person, because he's just a symptom of the larger network and all this other stuff that's going on as a whole.
This is bullshit. Right? I don't want to spoil anything, but the last 5 minutes of this movie make it about getting that one person. And
no doubt.
Right, so no, this argument you're giving me right now is completely disingenuous for what this movie actually does by the end.
No. By the end, yes, but again, we've agreed the ending kind of is the worst part of this. Like, for the majority of the movie, though, it's not about going after and getting revenge on this one guy.
Yeah, but I can't give the rest of the movie a pass because you just want to discount the ending as a separate thing.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it didn't impact me as hard as you want. But like, you got to look at that. Like, at what point does it become the audience is 100% against Killian specifically? And I would argue that doesn't happen until at least the third act hits. majority of the movie is an anti-system message.
It's a poorly paced story where we follow a character walking into different cities and just kind of killing time until someone finds them. It's repetitive and boring. I'll say it, right?
That's what I mean by the pacing issues.
Yeah.
It feels to me, and I have not read the original book, but it feels to me like this is a symptom of adapting too closely, because this strikes me the same way that a book that has this sort of message would be paced, of just going to these different cities, seeing people who have been through the system, who have all these different problems or whatever, and then just kind of dealing with it anthology style while the overarching plot progresses. Yeah. I agree with you. I think that is a major pacing problem there.
And while I'm also on complaints, and I don't want to get too specific here because it's very late game in the movie, but there's another supporting character, because he goes through a lot of like companion characters throughout the movie in different ways. And the last one we get to in the last like half hour of the movie, I think they rush something that could have been like, if you wanted to sell me on the point that you're saying you liked about this movie, if they wanted to actually hit me with that and make me feel it, I think if they nailed this relationship, then they should have introduced this character much earlier, made it a longer relationship. And then, I don't want to say anything about it yet, right? Because it is very late game and all that. And I'm not saying the original movie does it better, because the original movie's not trying to do anything serious with it. It's not, in the original movie, it's nothing more than just a quick like bit of tension, and then like, oh, it's all resolved in a very sort of cheesy movie way, and it's fine for what it is, but it's serving a much smaller purpose here. Whereas in this movie, the movie clearly wants it to be, oh, like something poignant's happened here. In this pairing of characters, and I don't think it earns it. It's too rushed. It's too quick.
I agree with you. I see the point they were trying to make, but I absolutely agree with you that this needed to happen significantly earlier in the movie if they wanted to make this work, because essentially it is a third act character. You can argue whether or not the third act is technically begun, but it is, for all intents and purposes, that's what it is.
She should have been introduced a whole act earlier, frankly. Yeah. Right? Whole act earlier. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for half the stuff to happen with that. But,
I know, but yeah. But again, you'd have to rewrite the movie, but like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It's interesting how many times you say you agree with me here, despite the fact that you're way more positive than I am.
Well, it's every time I'm saying I agree with you, it's from the viewpoint of like, yes, but it is... I recognize the problem is there, but like, I still really like what I sat through. Like, I still really like the message that it was going for. I like a lot of the way that the action scenes played out. I don't think that was ever really at fault. They were all creatively well done there. The biggest disconnect that I see between you and me here is that A, the pacing is a much bigger deal than I think it is for me. And B, when we do end up hitting that ending and it feels like it spoils it for you, it doesn't for me. I think that there is still some good done in there. And I think what it comes down to is like, I kind of really like the fact that it's not trying to do what you were saying of like saying it without saying it. Like finding you put it as a more clever way. You wanted a clever way to hide the message without actually characters having to come out and say it. But a big part of this is just this raw nerve, this untouched anger at how this character has been through the system and the rage that he feels at all this stuff happening. And I feel like, especially, I'm part of that. A lot of people have that anger. And when you're at that level of anger, you kind of just want someone to come out and say, yeah, you're right to be angry about this, and let's not dance around the point here. This is actually what's happening. And I like the fact that the movie had the balls to do that.
I think you can do it. You can do it once. You can have it build up to when he finally like just spills his guts out in a pivotal scene, and that can work. But I feel like the movie does it multiple times where characters just explain things of what's going on. Like there's no craft to it. And it's one thing to say, oh, yes, many of us can relate to this. Well, yeah, like I'm not saying you can or shouldn't. Like, it's very relatable things they're talking about, but that doesn't necessarily make it good writing the way it's presented to you. For me, the way it was presented was constantly getting in the way of caring about what they were talking about. So I actually like it even less now. I'm having to debate this with you because I'm having to fight in all my points, and I'm like, yeah, I have a lot of valid points here, and I'm not really remembering a lot of things in this movie that I liked all that much. It's not the worst thing ever. It's perfectly like okay for stretches. It is, but that's it. Like I would never go above that.
See, this is we've encountered this before. Usually, whenever I'm more positive on something than you are, I try to hold back a little bit because I know you. If I push too hard, you will snap back in the other direction. You'll be like, nah, actually, this movie sucks more. And I'm like, okay, sorry.
I think I have been true to my opinion of this movie from the get-go. Thank you very much. I have not reacted. It's just that in you making certain points and me going, well, that's a stupid point, and let me explain why it's stupid, it's making me realize how stupid some of these things are in the movie.
You see, it's also a byproduct of the movie itself, where the movie kind of has this moral high ground standpoint of like, don't back down in your beliefs, stand firm in what you have. And I'm just like, yeah, movie, I'll do it. And then I got to go up against the insurmountable network that is Pete.
Hey. No one likes the underdog and taking down the corrupt system more than me. I'm all for that in my movies. Thank you very much. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like in some ways, like the Running Man game as well, and this is maybe more a conceptual thing rather than the movie's fault if they're just doing whatever the book did, but like something that's a bit more structured. It kind of just feels like, oh, once he's out on running, he can go anywhere. He can sort of choose whoever he wants to disguise. I'm like, I would have liked maybe a couple more rules that he had to follow or something. You know,
that was one. I feel like there has to be a deleted scene or something because they explicitly at one point sit there and say, "Here's the rules," and they go like 3 rules, and it's about that making the blog every day. It's about whether or not they have to like stay alive for X amount of days or whatever like that.
Yeah.
But then later on in the movie, and I won't spoil exactly what, but they say a rule has been broken. And they explicitly say it's rule like 21. And I'm like, so there's a lot of rules, but the audience only really knows about these 3 up top.
Don't get me wrong, 21 would be too many to list. Yeah. So you put it out in a presentable way, but like, I don't know, just something to give it a bit more structure, I guess. I don't know, it's kind of maybe like focus a bit more on this idea of like maybe some people want to help him, some people want to turn him in because they'll get a little payday out of it. Like really focus on that maybe a little bit more than they actually did is maybe what I would have liked. But regardless, we'll be talking for a while now. We should probably get into the spoilers and dive into it. I will say, just in terms of some of the things we often bring up before we get to spoilers, I can't say I really noticed the music all that. I mean, there was constantly music. I can't say I really noticed it that much though.
Yeah, Edgar Wright's one that uses licensed music pretty decently, so I noticed those whenever they came up. It never felt out of place. It felt very much of the style that I would expect from Edgar Wright, but if we're talking score, I didn't notice anything stand out. There
was a reasonable amount of product placement in this. I did notice. At one point he's sitting in a bed eating Butterfinger bites, and I love Butterfinger, so I wasn't mad to see them, but it was...
There was a... God, I think it was when he was in the hotel in the beginning. There was an ad that was just like, oh, the official drink of whatever, Liquid Death. And I'm like, that sounds so outlandish, but I know for a fact that's a real drink.
Yeah, it's a real drink. I recognize
and I'm just like, okay, so that's actually, it's weird because if you didn't know about the drink, it would sound made up for product placement that it doesn't exist.
I don't even know if we have it here, but I've heard Americans talk about it, so I knew it was a real thing.
Yeah. It's a non-alcoholic beer that they gave this badass name so dudes wouldn't feel bad drinking non-alcoholic beer.
So toxic. It's so toxic.
Yeah, exactly.
This is manly chocolate. That's what a Yorkie is. I think they eventually changed it, but there was a chocolate bar called a Yorkie in the UK, which used to have the tagline, "It's not for girls," but at some point they had to change that. But that was their slogan for decades.
I was at a checkout the other day, and they had a big display right next to the checkout of a whole bunch of like gift sets for Christmas for like soaps and stuff like that. And it was so funny to see like the girly soaps are all just like, you know, normal product packaging of just like, here's the soap and here's like some scent things or whatever like that. And then you get to the man soaps and it's like black and chrome, and this ain't your mother's soap. And it's like, it's soap, guys. What are you doing?
This soap's got testosterone in it. It'll boost your follicles and whatnot.
All right, yeah, whatever. Maybe I want to smell like vanilla. You ever consider that?
Anyway, spoilers for The Running Man 2025. You have been warned. So, I mean, I don't actually want to go through the whole thing in order because I feel like that would be like going a little bit too in depth for some of it.
I think there is a misstep right at the beginning in that the very first scene we get is him at his job or whatever, trying to get his job back, and he has his daughter there. And he doesn't end up getting it, but he goes back to his home and then they are watching the TV or whatever. I think that initial getting the job back scene can just be cut. Like, I don't think that adds anything that the conversation immediately following it does not cover as well. And then it would have a much more stronger lead in of how prevalent the TV shows and game shows in this world are when we open with him just sitting and watching those all day.
Yeah, I also wonder as well if it might have been wise to start with him going in for the audition, right? Because that's what he does next, right? And then maybe flashing back, once he's quietly, at night, or do something to give you a bit more of the kind of the suspense of what is he doing, and then we can go back and explain why he's here. Not too late, but just a little bit later. I almost feel like all of the background with the family and his job, it was really bogging down the start of the movie because it was like, and I'm not saying I want an action-packed opening, but just something that had a little bit of it, because that moment when he's in line, when he goes to the TV station, and at this point he's intending not to go for Running Man. He promised his wife he will not go for Running Man. But he's in line, and this guy behind him collapses, and he tries to sort of catch him, and he's sort of yelling at the guards, hey, can you get some help for him? And they just sort of say, no help allowed, and they start beating him up for even suggesting they help this old man who's collapsed, and then put him to the back of the line. And that it's a good moment because it shows you that he sticks his neck out for others, and he will try and do the right thing, and so on and so on. But it's diminished in the scene when we get it because we've already heard the multiple times talk about the fact that he stuck up for his workers, and that's why he went to a union rep, because his workers were getting dosed with radiation poisoning or something. And it's like, we've already heard about this multiple times, and it feels like they've watered this down, whereas this moment on its own would have been a good little, hey, this is the type of character he is, before we get into the specifics of what his situation is.
Yeah, I also think, if we're moving into the audition process as well at this time, there's two sides to this character that they're wrestling with, and it's fine to have a complex character where things aren't always as cut and dry of how they work together. But the two sides are, he will do absolutely anything for his family, and he is the angriest man you have ever met. He has both of these things coinciding at the same time, and yet I don't feel like either of those fully gets there. I don't think either of those is the biggest thing that happens. And the one thing that really drove me crazy is we have the recurring thing as he's going through this process that his daughter lost a sock right before he went out to the auditions. He finds it in his pocket. And so he hasn't this whole time during the games. And they specifically even show him trying to give the sock back to his wife right before he goes into the games. And the wife sends it back to him, says, keep it for luck. And the sock doesn't come up. It's kind of used at the very, very end as a little signifier of oh, he's still there or whatever. But I think that that's the sort of thing where any time that he's down and out, that sock needs to come out and be here we go. Especially
given how much time they focus on oh, we've lost a sock, and he's looking under the couch for it and he can't find it, and then he finds it in his pocket when he's waiting in line. And he almost loses it when he gets beat up, and he reaches out to grab it. It feels like it's going to be this important thing to him throughout the rest of the movie, and it never really becomes that.
Yeah, it feels like it should be his totem or whatever, the thing that's just constantly grounding him. But instead, it's it's around maybe.
Yeah. There's a detail here where he clearly leaves the poor part of town, the slums, and goes into the rich part of town where all the business buildings are and all that, because he has to go through a security check, and he has to say why he's going in. And they let him in when he says he's going for an audition to the TV networks. But as soon as he gets beyond this gate, everyone's dressed better, everything looks a lot more clean, and it's very sterile looking, and all the rest of it. People are walking their over-designed dogs, the poodles and all that. So it does at least visually at that point give you a good sense of the world. I mean, if I was to say that if there was stuff I liked here in the early parts of like it was some of the visual stuff they were doing, which I think would have worked better even on their own as opposed to all the over explaining that they do, especially in this first 20 minutes.
That is one thing that I really like about the change, and obviously it was probably in the original book this way, but the change from the 80s version is it's not locked to like a pre-built Coliseum sort of thing. It's not like locked to just this, oh, we're in this specific part and you can only go so far. Like, he can go anywhere in the world he wants. It's a worldwide thing. He can technically countrywide, but you know, if he gets out of the country,
I mean, I think
game.
I think what's in the 80s movie is perfect for the 80s movie. I wouldn't change it for that. But I mean, obviously this is what they're doing here for this, and that's fine.
It does a good job though of, I think, exploring a vast majority of outside the city America. Like, yes, we spend time in cities. Yes, that does happen there. But the cities are always shown to be a bit run down, a bit slummish in a lot of ways. And then when we get to the outside of cities, it starts equalizing out, I guess. You still feel like everyone's poor and everyone is still not doing well, but it starts to look more and more with like what just normal places look like out in that side of America, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, I think again, this idea that they maybe overdo and like double down in some of the same like beats or points that they've already made. A good example for me is like, okay, so he goes in, he gets angry at the woman at the desk or the guy at the desk, and like Killian like phones down and says, "Hey, send him up." Which, by the way, Killian's name in this is Dan Killian, and I thought it was Killian Dane, but then I looked it up from the original movie, and it's actually Damon Killian. And I'm like, okay, I don't know where I got Dane from, but like, there's definitely they did change it at least from the last movie. Maybe this is more accurate to the book, but regardless, he goes up and they do a whole thing here where there's two other people that he kind of meets that are kind of like the other contestants on Running Man. One's this nerdy guy who has a lot of bad jokes, and I didn't like him. I didn't think he was very funny. And then there's kind of like the lady who's like kind of she's a bit hyper, and she's kind of like, you know, F this, let's do it. She's into it.
She is the Michelle Rodriguez character.
A little bit of that. But you see them both coming out of like the Killian office, right? And they're both coming out with a beautiful woman on their arm, and they're holding like a glass of champagne or whatever, and it seems all hunky dory. And then our main character Ben goes in and he sits with him, and you know, Killian's like, "Hey, you've got this fire," and I always say they've got a chance, but they never do. But you actually might have a chance of winning this, and so on, and that's all fine. But they do a whole thing at the end here when he's like, you know, he didn't want to sign this contract, but he's getting an envelope of money right now that he can give to his wife to go and treat the daughter, and then all this potential money that he might earn through the game. So he ultimately is going to sign, and at the end of it, this beautiful woman in a dress comes into the room and tries to hand him a glass and puts her hand on his shoulder, and he looks over and says, "I'm married," right? And they use that here for him to be like, well, I thought you and your wife had an understanding because of her line of work, and that, you know, gets him mad and he imagines smashing his head. But again, this is another example for me where if we hadn't like already had him and his wife talking so much about what their situation is, this might have been a good tease for like, oh, what is the relationship with the wife, and like, you know, did what he just said have some merit? But by the time we get to this, I feel like, yes, we know that he's a committed to his wife married man. Like, it was actually so boring for them to offer them this woman, because all I could think was, well, of course she's going to turn her down. Like, we already know this about him. And unless they surprise me here and he says, yeah, go on then, I'll have a quick romp before the game starts. I felt like it's beating me over the head with the same point. You've already established this part of his character to me, and you're burying it into the ground so much that I at this point I can't, like, you know, enjoy it anymore.
Let me ask the question of, what is the part of the character you think they're pushing too hard in? The fact that he's married and his wife and them, like, they have a good relationship despite her job?
No, it's not so much that. It's not so much like a specific point of his character they're pushing too hard. It's more just that they're reiterating points too much. So the same way I said in the line where he helps the old man, but we've already heard about him helping the people he works with, right? They've already made this point. So it feels diminishing returns when you do it again. Same here with this moment with the wife.
Yeah, I get you. I for me, it's the exact same problem, but I took this moment a lot more from the vein of showing just how angry he is, showing just how furious he is with the entire thing going on, because of that little, I guess you call it a dream sequence where he just smashes Killian's head into the desk. But it is that same thing where I think not 20 seconds before this is where we had the Rorschach test and like the word association game where he's just bitter and angry and everything he says is with this absolutely dry, like screw you sort of wit to it. But you're right in that it is just recapping that same idea, is that like he's pissed off. He hates all of this here and he's willing to do whatever he has to, but he's not going to like it.
Yeah. It just, it was just one of those things where I wasn't feeling how repetitive some of this stuff was. And then, of course, he goes into a hotel room for the night. This is like the night before the games will start, blah, 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 blah. And that's all fine. So one of the big things this movie introduces, though, just to sort of start jumping around a little bit.
Okay.
Is
real quick, before we get too deep into it, there is a history to this movie. We don't know everything that happened in the in-between, but at some point we moved off of the American dollar and moved into new dollars.
Okay, you want to talk about the cameo that someone gets here.
I have to know what you think about it at the very least. So they specifically show that, like, new dollars, even a small amount is enough. So it probably was a thing of like hyperinflation and they just introduced a new currency because like getting the drugs only takes like $5 new. It's barely anything.
Yeah, presumably you imagine that it's like $100 old dollars is $1 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
So yes, Arnold's on the money. That's his cameo. They put Arnold on the money, which is funny. Yeah. It's a cute callback to the original. That's fine, whatever. I'm not mad at it.
This is an alternate yet equally valid timeline to Demolition Man, where it's President Schwarzenegger happened.
I think the problem for me, though, is that when they show him at the start watching the game shows and it's like the hamster wheel thing where the guy's like trying to answer questions while he's on a big hamster wheel, but if he falls, that's him, he's out and he doesn't get any of the money. I was like, I want to see the other crazy game shows they've got ideas for. I want to see what all these are as opposed to the actual plot of the movie.
The only other one I saw, because there's a bit where like everyone who auditioned, they all show up in the changing room and they all get different jumpsuits, and the jumpsuits have logos on the back. And the only other one that I was able to make out is one of the jumpsuits has one that says "My First Rodeo," and all I could think is that's just a mechanical bull or something like that. That is absolutely much more death-defying than anything else.
Yeah, but knowing this universe, they're in probably with spikes around the floor or something, just to make it a bit more exciting.
And now you've been on for 5 seconds. Let's throw in the flamethrowers.
Yeah. Anyway, so one of the things they introduce here, right? So he's doing these tapes every day, and because he could just sort of hide somewhere, really, and get away. Like, how it wouldn't be that hard to just, go into a hotel room for 30 days with a fake name, because early on he gets a fake ID and stuff. So it's not like he's under his own name. But the thing that makes it risky, where he has to kind of go out in public occasionally, is that he has to put these tapes that he records into these like mailboxes that are like drones that fly off immediately as soon as you put them in. And I'm like, okay, that's what's forcing him into like positions where he can be seen, can be caught, so on. Obviously there's some more things as well, but we'll get into all that. But one of the things they introduce early on in this idea is that he's doing these tapes, and like quite quickly, because the first one he's going to do it in the front of like a giant painting in New York behind him. Like, no, that'll tell him what city you're in, you dolt. But luckily he thinks about it and he puts up a sheet. He's like, let's not give them any clues. And he records a little message, blah blah blah. A little bit into the movie, once he's starting to get a bit more pissed off and a bit more like agitated about how things are going, he makes a bit of an impassioned speech on one of his videos about like what the government or the company is doing to poor people and blah blah blah. And then when it plays though on TV, they've deep faked him into saying completely different things, right? He's saying stuff to make him sound like a crazy man, where he's happy that he killed people, blah 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 blah, and it makes him look really bad. So obviously from that point on, I'm like, okay, I can't trust anything they show unless we see it outside of the context of what they're showing on the TV screen, right? And this became a recurring thing for this movie that I think actually made it worse, because there's stuff that they do that I was like, well, clearly that didn't happen. This is going to pay off later. And then it didn't. For example, so the female contestant, right, who we don't really see because they all separate and go their own ways, right? So we see an update on her at one point where she's like the crazy one who goes to the casino and is like chancing her luck by just have party in open public. Yeah.
They explicitly go through it at one point and say there are 3 contestants. One is always so shit that he just fails out immediately.
The nerdy guy,
the nerdy guy. One is so much of like a nihilist of like, whatever, I'm just going to live it up big that eventually they flame out through just being caught. And then there's the last guy, which is, of course, Glen Powell's character.
Yeah, the one who might have a chance, the one who...
Yeah.
And it's very cynical, but you can sort of see, this is paced so they have a kill early on, then a kill a little bit into it, and then a kill near the end, so they can milk their season out of it.
I don't know if we even said it. It is 30 days.
Yes.
Specifically that they have
30
to
days,
last.
yeah. Yeah, we mentioned that, I think, at one point early on.
Okay.
So... we see her at a casino, and we see like a whole scene play out where the main hunter, what's his name, McCone, right, played by Lee Pace, and the one in the mask, and his goons all show up, and they're hunting her through the casino. They're shooting at her. She's like, diving over tables. She gets away. She gets into her car, and she drives off, and she like flips them off or says something like "F you guys," whatever. And it pauses, and the presenter of the TV show comes out on screen and says, "Aha!" But rewind that, because she got away, or did she? And then it cuts to like a shot of just her car on fire in a barn, and I'm like, that seems suspicious. I don't believe for a second you got her. You just want the world to think she's been got. And then they explain that 2 children with flamethrowers did it themselves, and they're getting like a lifetime supply of cereal for killing her, which is a funny thing on its own right. But because 1, they've established they can fake anything, and 2, because even the way this is edited looks super faked, I was like, well, she's clearly not dead. She's going to pop up later in the movie. Like, 100%. I would have bet you money this was a tease for her popping up later. Does she, David? Does she ever pop up?
No, she does not, Pete. However, okay, all right. I get where you're coming from. And I had the exact same thought the moment that they rewound the tape and said, like, oh, it looks like she escaped. And then they just show the car burning. I'm like, all right, of course she's coming back. Clearly she is. However, as the scene progresses, the point of the scene that they get across here is that these 2 kids killed her without like live cameras being there, without it being like part of the chase or the hunt or anything like that. And the scene immediately basically gets to the point of the audience hates that. They hate the idea that it's not live on camera and that it's, some randos are just doing it off elsewhere. And that, the idea that it all has to happen live on camera, is a major component going into the second and third act. The fact that he basically knows that he has downtime where he's more or less safe until the show comes on. So I argue that once it makes that point, it's more obvious that she did die because they needed to make that point.
You know what? I will concede a little bit. I still think I had those feelings as I was watching it, and I still think they put that idea in my head, so I was doubting everything I was seeing to the point where even with that point afterwards, I still kind of felt like, okay, I guess she's just dead then. All right, I don't give a shit, but okay. However, this broad complaint I'm saying of like they introduced this idea that they can fake anything on camera, and it looks lifelike. It's obviously the way they did this for real is they just filmed Glen Powell filming an alternate take of him doing this, so it looks very convincing. Is that you have that in your head the entire rest of the movie, so like obviously you should never be surprised if he says something different than what they said, and that's something to play with a little bit later on. But the big thing for me when we get towards the end of this movie, right, and we'll talk about the actual scenario and all that later, but they do a whole thing where Josh Brolin calls him, right, Killian, and says, hey, Ben Richards, you've done so well. We want to turn you into the future hunter, blah, 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 and you'll kill all the other hunters, and I'm endorsing that. I want you to do that, and it'll be seen as like a revenge thing. And he's like, wait, why would that be revenge? And then he's like, well, because they killed your wife and daughter. And like, he shows some footage, and I'm like, they've shown they can perfectly fake anything at any point, right? And it happens quickly because we see it like a minute later where he fakes up a message from him, like from Ben Richards, in like 10 seconds, and it's like, oh, that was quick. So it's like, okay, he should not instantly believe this, right? And to be fair, he does float the question, like, are they really alive?
He floats it multiple times.
Are they really dead? Like, I'm not saying the character doesn't react appropriately. I think he does for the most part. Maybe I would have put it in a slightly different order. Maybe I'd have had him, doubt it more and be in denial for a bit and then get worried that it's true or something, but that's minutia. That's not like a big deal. Broadly, he questions it. That's what he should do. The problem with this whole thing though, is that going into this big predicament in the third act, once he's got this in front of him and he's been told to make this choice, it just undercuts everything, because all I'm sitting thinking is, well, I don't think they're really dead, because I think if they were really dead, this would be a really unsatisfying way to reveal it. But you know, because the whole thing is that Killian's saying, hey, sign this contract, be a star, you'll make lots of money. And I'm like, but you're an idiot. Like, the whole reason why he wanted to make money was for his family. And if you've taken them away, then he would never say yes to this. This is, you know, and maybe that's the point, is that he is such an inhumane prick that he would never understand that. But
right.
it makes, there's no tension in his choice. Like, there's no section or second of the whole thing where you're ever thinking, oh, maybe Ben Richards will give in to the dark side here and take the money. Like, you never think that for a second. And the fact that not only do we spend this time questioning, are they really alive? Are they really dead? At this point in the movie, they've been off camera for so long, right? Basically, it's from the opening scene that the idea that we're doing all this for the wife and kid, it feels like because when they set up, oh, there's a security guard's going to go and protect them because it's common for the family of the runners to be like harassed or attacked. I was like, oh, we're going to cut to her occasionally. We're going to see like a subplot of her like being worried of watching the TV. I find, honestly, you want to humanize him? Show his wife watching the goddamn TV show and seeing how in danger he is. Like,
no, I was fully expecting the sequence where, you know, we're walking down the street, the mother with their daughter in the stroller, whatever. She's got the medicine. The daughter's now better again. However, there's a public viewing of the show, or maybe just like a bar TV where it's on. And she watches for like a quarter second as he's in the middle of an action scene and then turns away. Like, I can't watch this. I can't, because she was so super against him being on the show to begin with. That idea of like, oh no, I can't watch my own husband die here. You're right. She was out of the movie far too long, to the point where when we get back to it here, it's a problem. And
the bigger problem is when they pull the whole, because they basically do too much of this. Did this happen or didn't it? Because we get it with her and the kid's death. That did the hunters really go after them and kill them, right? And that sort of undercuts everything that's happening on this plane sequence, which again, we'll talk about the setup of all this and that in a minute. But then after this, when the plane's taken out, because basically what happens is when he's not going to sign, Killian says, well, we're going to make it look you're trying to fly the plane into the headquarters, and we're going to use that as an excuse for other planes to shoot you down, or drones to shoot you down, right? Now, from what I've always heard from the original book, apparently it just ends with him flying the plane into the building, as opposed to what happens here, which is they have planes shoot him down. I could be wrong, but that was always my understanding. Because my understanding is that after 9/11, people said they'd never do the original ending of the book because it's too close to that.
Okay, yep, as I'm reading the Wikipedia page, you're right. Yeah, okay. He does actually hit the network tower. So
they teased it, so they kind of did it in a way that where it didn't actually have it happen, but fair enough, right?
Yeah.
But this is where the movie does the thing where the character who was introduced earlier, who's basically a YouTuber, like a YouTuber,
he's a conspiracy YouTuber. Yeah. He's like breaking down all this stuff where he's like, you ready for the truth, fellow seekers?
Yeah. We see a little bit of his video earlier on when our main guy, Ben's meeting him in the middle of the movie. But the movie literally just pauses and he like rips through the image as if it's like on a projector screen and starts saying, oh, here's what really happened to Ben Richards. And he's like, oh, the people said there's an escape pod on this plane. Is there? Isn't he? Does Richard live? Maybe Ben Richards lives. And then like we speed run a sequence where Ben Richards like leads like an uprising at the TV studio where he comes in and takes out our bad guy Killian. But not only that, so we've had is the wife and daughter really dead or not during the whole plane thing? We've had, is Ben Richards dead or not, for like, you know, a minute while we're doing the YouTuber bit. And then he shows up and very whatever, like unceremoniously does this. And then there's also, to wrap up back round to the wife and kid thing, we do this sequence where the wife and daughter, not only are they alive, she's in a supermarket. She's walking around just going, oh, I'll get this sugary cereal for my baby. Oh, like she's just living the normal dream life. There's nothing going on with her.
Slight pivot on that. They do explicitly say at the beginning of the movie, we're going to take them, we're going to hide them away under an assumed name. And then at the end of the movie, the person at the checkout counter says like, oh, here you go, Mrs. Richards. And she's like, that's not my name. Like, this is her living a life, but like, all of her identity is changed. So she's allowed to do that.
Sure. Right. I'm not saying she isn't allowed to do that. That's not my point. My point is we cut to her and she's completely fine with her kid. And then when she hears the name Richards, she's like, that's not my name. And then looks out the window, and then standing there with the scarf over his face is her husband who was supposed to be dead. And it's like, oh no, the happy family's back together. And all I could feel is that, like, it's almost like you wanted to, like, tease the audience with the really dark, like, ending with, like, a really poignant message about this guy giving up his life and his wife and daughter being left behind. But then you did the YouTuber breaks open the fourth wall, comes out and explains to us why it's not a bad ending, and then gives us him taking down the villain and reuniting with his wife and daughter. It's like, here's your big happy Hollywood ending. F you.
So, yeah, all right. I don't feel as badly about it as you do. Not on the FU point there. I do agree that I feel like it was speedrun. That we, like...
Oh, it's super speedrun.
Here's the thing. Part of the theater experience here, I was just finishing up, like, an extra large Coke at that point. I was not going to be able to survive another 15 minutes of this movie. I would have actually died in my seat if that had happened. So I was kind of hoping it would speed run through a little bit. But after the fact, watching the thing, yeah, I agree. I think that there's a little bit more that could be done here, because the part with the YouTuber is the most speed run bit. And that is where he's basically saying, you know, the plane while he was on the plane, he had this whole long speech, and I loved the speech. The speech is fantastic, but he has this whole long speech, and none of it gets aired because he's like, no, we cut to commercials as soon as it was obvious you were about to start moralizing. So whatever, nobody heard about that. But then when the plane exploded, the black box landed somewhere. Some randos picked it up, decrypted it, and then when they realized the message was very implicating against the network, they started distributing it, and that's what kind of led this uprising thing where everyone is now like, we know about this, it's moved beyond channels that the network can control, so therefore it's out in the public now. And that's what leads into the very final scene, which is Gillian actually being up in front of the crowd, and they just immediately start firebombing the place. Like, it's an all-out hellhole there. I think the scene of him meeting his wife again needed to just be cut. I think we end the movie with the ambiguous nature of, did she survive? Didn't she survive? Who the hell knows? But the moment you have that, that's what makes it that glossy Hollywood ending feel. I think if you had it be we cut to, maybe he survived, maybe he didn't. We see this escape pod coming out. Then we cut to the studio, and the very last thing we see is that figure coming up through the silk screen as it catches on fire, and he pulls down the mask to reveal he's still alive. That seems more intentional to me than anything with this meeting up with the family bit again. That's the part of the ending that really just kind of made me feel like it was not working. That part right there.
Yeah, I think that the thing for me though is that the glossiness of the wife and daughter being alive, and I do think him coming after Killian's also feels a bit glossy as well, because it's like, hey, he's alive, he's going to take down the villain, who's now the main villain. He represents the bad things in the world in this movie. But I think the stuff with the wife and kid is that for me that was always kind of thin. It always felt a little bit like, just because of the way it was presented, it always felt just sort of stock, like daughter's sick, you know. They're struggling for money. I don't know. I never felt like it was doing anything particularly special with that in the first place. So I wouldn't say that this ending with them feels like a complete 180 in how they were handling the material. It was just taking it to the zenith for me, where it was like, yeah, this is like the worst possible like way you've paid this off. So
no, that's fair. I agree with you. I think that the family plot, it's central to the backbone of the character in, like, on paper, but it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like we spent enough time getting this sort of family dynamic there. We didn't spend enough time throughout the movie either cutting back to them or just having him actually show or like talk about ways that he loves his family. There are some scenes where it happens. When we meet the Amelia character, he straight up says, like, here's something that happened with my kid, and I'm like, this is why I'm not the bad guy or whatever. But it feels less about how much he loves his family and more about how he's not the bad guy, how he is the good guy in the situation, despite the fact that the network is absolutely trying to play him off like the bad guy here.
Well, you brought up Amelia, so let's talk about the Amelia character and how this
sure. This
fails.
If you're looking at the point of the movie, as he's making his way through the first bit, he comes across characters A, who is like this family who's having to pay for cancer meds or whatever. They've been through the rough of it. They then direct to character B, who's Michael Cera. He is an absolute anarchist. His father used to be a cop, and then his father got killed by the cops when he wouldn't go along with some stuff. And then he ends up having to go on the run and hijacks a car from character C, who is Amelia, who is part of the higher society, but still thinks of herself as a good person, despite the fact that she has completely bought into the network propaganda. And this is already in the third act when she shows up.
Yeah, she's watching the Kardashian style show, which I can't remember what it was called, but it was
the Americanos.
The Americanos, that's what it was. And he breaks into the car and she's immediately like, oh, you're a filthy human being. You're a murderer. You do this, that. You abandoned your wife and sick daughter, because that's what the TV station have been saying about him, to try and make him more dramatic and villainous. And to be fair, that was something in the original movie as well. They painted Arnold as someone who butchered a bunch of people in Bakersfield. I remember that opening, and that was kind of their whole thing. So yeah, basically the debate here and the point, the character arc, which clearly this woman's going to have. And the problem with this is that, like, in some ways she should be the co-lead of the movie. Like, because if the character arc from her is going to be that she has all these preconceived notions of who this guy is, that he's lesser, that he's a bad guy, that he's a villain, that he is all these things, but then sees through his actions that he is a good person who is not going to hurt her, that the TV station are just killing people left and right to cover their tracks, and that now she'll probably be killed because they're just she's just witnessing the things they're doing, and they'll have to cover it up. Like, it feels like, oh, this is like a huge character, because this is going to be the person who he kind of changes. So this is the person who he's going to, like, it's one thing for him to run into other people who are already on, like, oh, we're the revolution, we want to change everything that's, you know, got wrong with this world and this country and blah blah blah, but she's someone who is just in a life of comfort, right? She's, as he puts it, you spent more money on that scarf than would pay for, like, my daughter's healthcare for the next 20 years, but you know, nice scarf though. Like, I see why you wanted it. It's like, you know, it's a human life you've got around your neck, but blah blah blah. And it feels like all the tension that's supposed to come from this, where he's like, hey, you're my hostage, we're going to do this, and then this idea that she's eventually just pretending to be his hostage to get, like, past, like, certain security, to, you know, get onto the plane and do whatever. Like, there's a whole story there of building trust, of, like, her learning and starting to trust him and realize that he's a good person, and wanting to help him get back to his family, wanting to help him, you know, take down the bad guys or whatever it may be. And it just speed runs it so goddamn much that by the time she's, like, having her moments of doubt and hesitation and being like, oh, I think I'm going to help him actually, it just feels like, I don't believe you. I don't buy it, movie. You've not done the legwork for this.
Yeah, no, I think it's a problem where the previous two people that he met along his journey here are steadfast. They have already found themselves. We know what their characters are. They're not characters.
The first guy was the YouTube, like, anarchist, right? That's him.
Was he? I
think it was.
I feel like most likely it was, but there was just enough where he was saying, like, oh yeah, we've been duplicating these tapes and spreading them around. Like, I wasn't sure that it was. It looked like
an edit bay that he brought him into, and obviously when he's on YouTube, he's got, like, the mask and the glasses, so he's hiding his identity. So that's why you obviously you're not sure, but I'm pretty sure it was just him.
But regardless, he's steadfast in his identity, and obviously he's friends with Michael Cera, who is even more steadfast. He is completely committed to the cause of taking down the network, to the point where he's printing out pamphlets, and he's got, like, an anarchy symbol for him to, like, take pictures and videos in front of. I
don't think there's a more perfect, like, example to give of how sort of weak I think this movie's writing is than that the YouTuber character saying to him, hey, and whatever you do, don't bring up hot dogs. And he's like, hot dogs? And it's like that little thing to get the audience going, why? What's important about hot dogs? And then he goes to Michael Cera, and he sees this, you know, outdoor hot dog vendor kind of stand, like, in the corner of his, like, room, and he's like staring at it, and Michael Cera's like, go on, you can ask. And, like, the previous character told him to not ask about hot dogs, and immediately Michael Cera's like, yeah, do you want to know about the hot dog thing? I'll tell you about the hot dog thing, right? And then it just ends up being, oh, it's his dad's hot dog thing, because when he gave up being a cop because he didn't like that it was becoming all privatized and owned by the companies, the dad gave up being a police officer, and then his old cop buddies ended up, putting him in danger constantly or whatever until he eventually died. And it just kind of felt like, so you teased something that sounded interesting because it was a weird, quirky detail, like don't mention the hot dogs, and then it ended up just being, oh, that's his tragic backstory about his dead daddy because he sold hot dogs. That's shit. It's lame. It's terrible.
I get what you're saying. It's strange because usually I would attribute that to something of like something was cut out. I would attribute it to something of like, oh, maybe we spent more time like dancing around the hot dog stand in the corner.
You thought there was more hot dogs?
No, because I think that last line of the YouTuber saying, hey, don't ask about hot dogs, feels so tacked on to the conversation that I think in initial screenings they were like, what's with the hot dog thing? Why would he even care about that to begin with? Like, he's got so much junk around this room. Why would the hot dog thing draw his eye? And so they had to specifically point out the hot dog thing is weird in this context. So you got to have that. But yeah, I agree that the setup to it is weird. But as much as you're dissing the backstory of all that, I like it from the viewpoint of it's
ham-fisted.
It's a radical. No, it's ham-fisted, but it's true to life. It's the sort of thing of like,
oh, piss off. Is the stuff. No, being true to life does not give you a pass on being ham-fisted. No, I will not accept this. No.
I mean, I'm not saying it's got to give him a pass or whatever like that, but in terms of seeing a character who is this far radicalized, this far down the rabbit hole, where he's printing off pamphlets and stuff like that, if they had just said like, I always associated with the cause. Like, no, there needs to be something strong to get him this dedicated. And having his dad be someone who was actually, quote unquote, one of the good cops, and then to be killed by all of the bad ones is absolutely that.
All of the bad, like all like millions of them, all just
every single one descended on his hot dog stand.
I think Michael Cera's character is terrible, and I think he's partly maybe it's a miscast, but also miswritten. The entire sequence in this house is played for comedy between the deaf mum who would turn on Richards in a second if she knows he's there, and she does the second time you see her because she catches him in the house. Like that's all played for laughs. The fact that he wants to have fun with the SWAT team that's coming in because he's got all these booby traps set up, one of which is an electrified four that he's going to shoot his water gun on. One is like what was the second one? There was a second trap. It was like,
it's a full Home Alone thing. He's got like a banister that pops out of the wall to like smack them down. Well, and then he's got a table full of acids that he flings up into their faces.
And he takes them upstairs because he's got a fireman's pole to go back down into the room they started in. And then it's like, we're still in the place we started. And it's like, oh, there's a door behind the hot dog thing. And it's like, okay, that takes you into the sewers or whatever. I guess we're down there now. It's all played for laughs. I hate it. I hate all of it. No,
I agree. That entire sequence of him doing the Home Alone bit, it felt to me like they just needed that mid-movie action scene. It had been 20 minutes since their last one. They needed to do something here. I fully agree with you that it stands out and it doesn't work. But I think the Michael Cera character, up until he pushes the button to call for the cops, did work for me.
Nah, this is what it's getting from me. A bunch of wank is what it is.
All right.
Bunch of wank. For some reason we're going backwards, but the other big action sequence is when he's hiding in the motel and he's like, this is, he was in the fancy hotel to begin with, but then he started having nightmares about them showing up after him, so he wanted to go a bit more low-key, more covert, and he ends up in this cheap motel somewhere, and he's
in Boston, I believe.
Yeah, so he's hanging around because he was in New York in the big hotel to begin with. Because I don't know what city they started in, because it wasn't New York they started in, because he got a train to New York from the city they started in.
Yeah, they call it the fictional co-op city. So that nebulous area right between Gotham and Metropolis.
No, it sounds like Delta City. It sounds like, Detroit turned into Delta City. So something turned into Co-op City. I don't know which city it was, but one did. That's what
I mean, I would have thought New York based off of the clear cut, but New York still exists.
And would you believe that Michael Cera's house is in Maine, everyone? It's in Maine.
Just Maine. Not just Maine. They dropped the name.
Yeah. It's Stephen King, you see. He has to have Maine be any story.
Yep. I mean, That's in the original book. If you're carrying it over, it's whatever. It's just one of those things that like, people in the audience who don't know about are like, hey, isn't that from that It movie?
Do you know what it is? It's you know, like in Marvel specifically, like so many of the superheroes are based around New York, but at least with New York, it is like one of the biggest, most well-known cities in the world. So you get why it's kind of a nexus for everything. It's just really funny to me that in Stephen King's universe, Maine is the nexus point of all supernatural things that happen in the world. It's like everything that goes through Maine. It's like, you know, it's...
Yeah. I mean, for the Marvel stuff, it was also because that's where their headquarters was. Like, they were able to look out the window and be like, oh, let me just draw that real quick.
Yeah. Anyway, see, the whole time in the motel is that he finds a grenade along with a few other things in a box, and he like ends up using that, of course. The whole thing here, the set piece of the sequence is that he's trying to go for a shower because he stinks, so he's like just walking around in a towel, but that's when the hunters are coming in, so he's sort of like hiding around. He actually climbed down from the roof in his towel, but then he has to like take the towel off to break into the window to get his bag of stuff, because, you know, they give him some starting money and some things like that he needs, you know, his recording device for the vlogs.
Also, we got introduced to William H. Macy's character, who gave him extra stuff on top of it, because he's kind of like an underground dealer character that he was familiar with.
Yeah, they gave him like some disguise stuff where he was disguised as a guy with a mustache first, and then as a blind priest a little bit later on. I felt like I don't know what I was expecting, but I felt like they put a lot of emphasis on setting that up. I thought it was going to be a bigger deal later that he was going to be in disguises throughout the movie, and it ended up just kind of being a couple of scenes where he's just kind of, you know, it's how he's getting past some people.
Yeah, look, this is kind of the same as the pacing problem for me. When they started it up, my initial thought was, how are we gonna do this? Just from like a movie making perspective, the Arnold one. Do you remember like the time period on that? Like, it wasn't even a time period. He had to like get to a checkpoint, right? He had to.
Yeah, but it wasn't like a 30-day thing. It was like a one night kind of gauntlet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, just a special overnight sort of thing. That's the bit for this where I was like, in the storytelling of the movie, how are we going to show 30 days passing? And the answer is we get about 2.5 weeks. Like, we don't get the whole way. But even then,
day 18, I believe, is when the ending happens.
Right. So that's kind of something in the beginning I was feeling was, how are we going to show time passing? And they basically show, you know, day 1 you survived, day 2 you survived, and then they start skipping a few. They start saying like, you know, you had 3 days here, 4 days here, whatever like that. But it was the same thing between that and the wardrobes, the costumes, disguises, that I was kind of thinking like, if he's going to keep on switching between them, if we're going to keep on showing these different things he's switching to, how are we as the audience going to get a feel that he's doing that? And what the movie ended up deciding is, maybe he was switching costumes constantly, but we only get 2. We only get the blind priest and the mustache guy. And maybe from the filmmaking perspective, that's better off, so as to not try to like confuse audiences with what he may look like at any point. But it does feel like it was set up and not really paid off.
Oh yeah, I'd cut them, to be honest. I mean, I know that like, how does he get into the hotel without instantly being known who he is? That's maybe a problem there, but like, for the most part, it just kind of feels like, you know, he's doing like the Irish accent when he's the priest. He's like, what is it, my child? You know, he's doing all these things, and they're trying to milk some tension out of like, does this guy recognize him? And to be honest, by that point in the movie, I'm like, I'm so beyond caring if someone recognizes him.
Honestly, his best disguise in the whole movie was right as he's gotten into Maine, he's going to Michael Cera's house. He's got a crutch and he's wearing an N95 mask.
Yeah, face mask. Like, yeah,
that's all you need, man. No one's gonna like double check you there.
Yeah, a face mask and a hood. There you go. Yeah, and because you're walking with a cane, you probably give off the impression you're a bit older than you actually are. Yeah. So that, you know, that alleviates some suspicion.
That can't possibly be the running man. That's the limping man.
And yeah, when he's stumbling around like that, he sees some people watching the TV, and he sees that some of the poor people are starting to like build a following for him, and like, this idea of Richard Lives being like a slogan that they're all saying. And I'm like, I like the concept of this. I don't think the movie goes into it enough to really, you know, like, because Michael Cera is like, oh, you're the initiator for the revolution, blah blah blah. But he just says that. I'm like, I really would have preferred the idea that he actually maybe at some point, like maybe if you told him that his wife and kid were dead like halfway through the story, and like he makes himself lost. He almost just gives himself up or something, and he realizes he's got something to fight for. And maybe he actually buys into the idea that, oh, if maybe I can do something with this following that I'm building or something. I don't know, but
yeah. It's weird because Michael Cera kind of describes it best in how unconventional it is, where it's essentially he's like, look, I don't believe in any of that stuff. I don't care about your message or the networks or whatever. I just want to get back to my family. And Michael Cera points out, like, it doesn't matter if you do. We can just take you and your ability to get through the show and put these messages on top of it. Like, it doesn't matter really what you believe. You're the initiator just because we can use that as the fuse for everything else. And I like that viewpoint. I like the idea that he doesn't have to believe any of this stuff in order for everyone else to put a larger message onto it.
Yeah, and so anyway, just to sort of skip back to the stuff in the plane, because there's a whole thing here where like the main...
Plane's at the very end.
Yeah, Hunter, where he's like wanting to kill him, but Kellyan's like,
They're
no.
not live.
Yeah. You can't kill him until we're live, and then Kellyanne makes the offer, hey, kill all the hunters, and then you can be the new super hunter on the new seasons or whatever. Hunter 6, I believe, was one of the titles that he gave him.
There's a whole thing in the in-between here where like apparently there's some super explosive that can take out like 6 miles if you got like 10 pounds of it, and he's like, yep, I got that in my pocket. And then as soon as they get on the plane, it scans him and he doesn't know about it, so he keeps on making these threats until Dan comes over the line and he's like, all right, we know you don't have a bomb. Can we just talk like normal people now? Can we just stop doing that?
Yeah. So, obviously he turns down all this stuff, and the plane gets blown up by drones, and we think, or for a second before it pauses, and then YouTuber comes out and tells us to think otherwise. And it's just like, this is like, because when he comes out and just starts saying, oh, but these planes apparently have a safety pod where maybe he could have I was like, this is the worst possible way to convey this information to an audience. This is the least exciting and least like it's just such a you may as well have Edgar Wright pause the movie and come out and go, now audience, he might have survived that, because you see these futuristic planes have like safety evacuation pods.
Here's the thing, the safety pod thing, I agree. I think that was just kind of like a bit too much. Maybe they should have set that up earlier on, because they even talk about how many bathrooms are on this plane in order to have a tense scene later on. But
6.
6 bathrooms. The bit that I did like about it though, and this is like, there is currently, as we are filming this, a little conspiracy video going around of how like a YouTuber faked a speed run or something like that like 10-15 years ago, and I was linked to it. I watched it, and like part of it is him going through and saying like, watch this strand of hair disappearing and reappearing through cuts to show that like he didn't do this speed run all in one go or whatever. And all I could think as I was watching that today was this part where the YouTuber jumps in. He's like, what happened to the purple shirt guy? Oh, they cut to ad break. Purple shirt guy's jumping up and down. They cut back. Where's purple shirt guy? Evidence that this is taken from an earlier episode. And I'm just like, this fits. Like, this is the same vibe, the same energy. So at least I got the YouTuber conspiracy theorist feel right.
Yeah, I just don't think he should be explaining key. I mean, maybe early on you can use this for like sort of world building exposition perhaps, but he should not be pausing the third act and explaining to us why the main character might not be dead.
He's not pausing the third. The third act ended with the plane exploding. This is the denouement. We're wrapping up the movie at this point.
Yeah. Denouement, go F yourself, more like.
Why aren't you writing things with that kind of wit, Pete? Jesus.
Yeah, the difference is I didn't put it on a script page and then make a $1 million movie out of it and then say, hey, like, look at all the money they gave me to make this.
Hold on. $110 million.
$110 million? Oh, jeez. This is a sad state of affairs. Yeah, I don't... it's not the worst thing ever as you're watching it. It's very much kind of like... I don't know, kind of like sort of Netflix levels of just okay for the most part. At least that's how it felt for like a lot of it. But then the ending just completely like killed it for me. It nosedived. And then talking through it and talking about these different ideas and talking about these things, I'm like, I don't know if I was necessarily clocking in the moment that I was frustrated that they were repeating things. Or I was like, oh, this moment with the main character would have been more impactful if they hadn't already told us this 2 times before we saw a visual reaction from him in a scene. Maybe it would have hit harder if the first time we see him react to the idea that his wife's got a job that might put her in the crosshairs of other men. Maybe if we didn't get that until the moment we see him react to it, as opposed to it coming up in conversation but with her, or the him protecting, like this idea that he protects other like people that he works with. There's literally a montage when he's doing all the testing, right, in the rehearsal or the audition process, where it cuts to like footage of him on different jobs, and it's basically showing you why he's good at this test. And like one's like like a wall climbing thing, and it cuts to him climbing up with some rafters, and he grabs someone because they fall, and he does that in the rehearsal with the guy who falls. He used to run across beams on a building site, so he's really good at this test where he's running across these beams and they're a bit off balance, and he's able to do that. And it's just like it almost feels like it's just everything's just laid on a bit too thick. It's like he's had a specific experience in every single thing that we're throwing at him here, to the point where it's like it's just not. I don't know. It's just leaving a little bit of room for interpretation goes a long way, I think.
I mean, I get what you're saying. I understand the viewpoint there. I just disagree. Like, I think that showing that stuff is just a quick shorthand to show, like, why is this guy any different from the nerdy guy? Like, what does he have that the other one doesn't? And the answer is he does have experience doing these sort of things that would require him to be able to get through. Now, the real question is, how did nerdy guy get through the process? God only knows that one. Why did he end up on Running Man?
I mean, I think they answered that. They wanted a nerd to lose quickly, so that's why they let him through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get what you're saying with the doubling down and like repeating things over and over again. I did recognize it happening specifically with the, him being so angry and all that, because it didn't feel like whenever they were showing him being angry, it didn't feel like it was a consequence of him being angry. It felt like they were still trying to convince the audience that he was angry. It wasn't like
that's a good point. No, that's a very good point. Does he ever get angry in the first act of this movie and there's a consequence for him getting angry? There isn't. Not once. Because we see him like, they say the whole thing in the opening scene was like, oh, I brought my baby not to like tug on your heartstrings, but because it will stop me from getting angry and punching you because I have to hold my baby. Like that, he says that, and that's to tell the audience, hey, he's got a temper, he gets angry. And it's always righteous anger. It's never because he's a dick. It's always like someone's being bad to him or doing something, whatever. So it's like, okay, and you see him get angry when Killian says something about his wife, and you see him get angry and whatever, but there's never like, because I feel like a more interesting start to the character might be him getting angry. Like, let's say instead of getting fired because he was trying to look out for people, which is just heroic from the start, because an arc where he becomes more heroic would actually be a story. So that would be good. But he's already a hero, right? He already tried to be a hero. Maybe if the movie started with him losing his job and getting blacklisted because he lost his temper, maybe for a righteous reason, but it's because he lost his temper that he's found himself in this predicament. So later on in the movie, when he's saying, oh, I did this to myself, I'm like, I don't think I agree with you. This movie has made it very clear that you did not do this to yourself. You're in a system that is pushing you into this one horrible option. This was not your, thing. Well, actually, except one thing where William H. Macy says, oh, by the way, I was going to give you a job tomorrow, but you jumped the gun on this Running Man thing. And that was such a weird moment for me, because I'm like, oh, so he's kind of an idiot?
I didn't take it as an idiot. I just took it. I think what we're supposed to get from that is that he's so hyper focused on what is happening right now. He's not like thinking ahead. He's not worried about like whatever's happening there. Yeah. The problem is that doesn't really pay off either. Yeah. We don't get a payoff.
That was a separate point. No, I just thought of that because I was talking about him like being forced into an option. I was like, oh yeah, technically there was an out that he just didn't realize until after the fact. But yeah, you
want to know what the better opening here is, and it's a movie that we literally just did over on Collector's Cut like a week ago. Is Sean Connery's character in The Hill, where he is brought up for a court martial or whatever you want to call it because he was defending his men in his platoon or whatever from going out into certain danger.
But we don't know the context of it at the start. We don't know the context of it until like end of Act 2. Like it takes time before he finally opens up and says, this is what I was doing. This is why I did what I did. Yeah.
But I'm saying you open up with that same sort of action, that thing of standing up to the authority for doing like what is morally right, and immediately the audience is with your character. They're immediately on the same side there, and then B, we get to know exactly what kind of person he is going on at the same point, and that same sort of anger is allowed to flare out. But beyond all that, I was saying I recognize the fact that there is these duplicate moments and such like that, but what really makes it work for me more than I think it works for you, and I'm not saying it makes the movie great, it's still got issues, but what makes it work for me is that it feels like it goes in with a very clear point it's trying to make, and as muddy as it sometimes gets, by the time that it reaches the end point, I feel like it has very clearly made its point, and it does like get an emotional reaction out of me, not from the character viewpoint, but just from the movie as a whole, how the story was presented. I think that it managed to get that sort of righteous anger that the main character has infused into the audience.
How do I best? I mean, I'm just kind of summarizing points I've also made here, but like, I guess the way I would put it is that when your movie's got like a message or a story point or the ultimate story that you want to get across to the audience, for me, it should be like a good pull shot, right? Or snooker if you're in the UK, right? But I mean, we play pool in the UK too, to be fair.
Billiards.
Yeah. But this idea of like, when a movie's too like on the nose, and I think this movie is too on the nose, where it tells you things 3 times before the action happens, where it feels redundant by that point, and was like, I'm bored of this idea because you've already told me about it 3 times, right? And not like in every sin that I've brought up in this movie, I don't think any one of them on their own would be enough to like be a problem that would crater the whole film, but they all add up. They all add up to a consistent feeling throughout the whole thing. But when you've got an idea, a message, a moral, a subtext to your movie that you want to get across to the audience, a good filmmaker, a good storyteller, doesn't just feed it, doesn't spoon feed it to you, right? They lead you along a path so that you're kind of taking the turns on the path yourself as you're kind of getting the points that it's making. And when I say it should be like a pull shot, what I mean by that is you don't hit the ball that needs to go into the the pot like directly. You hit the cue ball, and the cue ball hits the other ball and goes into the pot. And I know that sounds like maybe a bit pedantic, but it's almost this idea where the director, the storyteller, the writer, whoever, should be guiding you there in a way where they're thinking 2 steps ahead of you the entire time because they know what the story is and what the point's going to be, instead of constantly turning to you and going, now you understand where we are right now, right? You understand that at this point, this is what we're talking about, okay? And we're going to, that's how I felt watching this movie.
Okay. I get what you're saying. It reminds me of, I think it's a Futurama quote where one of the characters is like, you can't just have your characters say how they're feeling. That makes me feel angry. Like, kind of that same sort of vibe where it's, you have to take sort of an indirect route in order to make it resonate more, in order to make it just a bit more hidden from view.
There's no deftness to this. There's no nuance. It's just...
I'll agree with that.
Shoved in your face. And I think there's sometimes where that can work if you want something to be very blunt. But I also feel like this is kind of dancing this weird line of wanting to be a crowd-pleasing like action blockbuster, wanting to be funny, and then also wanting to do the science fiction elements. And I don't think they all... Like, I mean, say what you will about the Arnold version, but that just clearly wants to be a fun, crowd-pleasing 80s sci-fi action movie with Arnold one-liners. And I think in the what it's trying to go for, it succeeds. I think this one almost is a little bit confused as to exactly what it wants to go for and land on, right? And it's sort of dipping its toes in too many things. And I think at the end result, I feel that messiness to it, where, because my first complaint was the tonal inconsistencies, and I think that's a big part of this for me, is that I just never felt like I was locked into the story because I never felt like a consistent voice as I was going through it.
I mean, I can see what you're saying about some of the tonal inconsistency. I don't think it's nearly as defined. I don't think I felt it as badly as you did. There's a couple scenes where the darkness of it kind of stood out to me, but everything else kind of had much more of a generally lighthearted vibe.
Yeah, because for example, when he's in the motel and he's running away from the bad guys and he tries to throw the grenade and then the bad guy just kicks it back at him and it's like this funny, like goofy, actiony moment. But then at the end of the movie when he's on the plane and the same bad guy's pulling a shard of glass out of his eye, and I'm like, what sort of tone are we going for here with the action and violence? Because one scene's telling me slapstick, goofy, lol, oh, I'm going to kick up the grenade with my hands as if I'm like hot potato, and then the other one's like, oh, ultra surreal violence. No,
I'll fight against that. From the beginning of this movie, the very first thing they present you with is the hyperviolence. Like, at no point in this do they ever say that the hyperviolence is not there. That grenade kicking scene, yes, that's a bit more slapstick, but it is immediately followed with like everyone in this hotel being killed. Like, it's absolutely not trying to play it up as a overly comedic scene comparatively to everything else. It's just a stunt moment that happened.
Yeah, for the record though, my complaint wasn't hyper violence. I'm all for a bit of hyper violence. My problem was the inconsistencies in how serious the violence seemed to be taken throughout the course of the movie. That was my issue.
I feel like that's kind of the design of the movie, though, is that we're set in this future where it is so desensitized to the violence, where like literally in their ads they're showing people getting their heads blown off. I think one of the things is like they're showing the season intro to The Running Man, and it immediately opens up with like, you're a red, white, and blue-blooded American, and you live in the best goddamn country on this earth, and in this universe even. And then they just show, like, the whole context of the show, I know this is very late to get into that, but the whole context of the show is that they explicitly say the Running Man people are people who don't feel like they should have to work for a living. And so they contextualize it.
Which is a lie, obviously, at least in Ben's case anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. But they put it on that sort of level because overall, the message of the movie, especially as put out by that speech from Glen Powell, is the networks, all these shows and stuff like that, the whole purpose of it is to get everyone fighting each other, getting everyone so angry at each other that we don't turn and look at the people who are really causing the problems here, the networks and everything else. And that's also where I think it was clever that they worked in the Americanos, the Kardashian ripoff, and they were just kind of like peppering that throughout because it shows it isn't just the Running Man idea. It isn't just this thing of like hyper violence or whatever. Those reality shows are also built for that exact same purpose. Look at these rich people and how petty their problems are compared to yours. Be angry at them.
Conceptually, I'm not against any of this. I think this is conceptually all fine. I just don't think it does that great a job of telling the story. If you wanted to give me a story where it starts off with the violence being kind of not taken seriously, but by the end it gets more serious because he's kind of like coming to bear with it, I think that's the sort of thing where you probably needed a character who enjoyed the Running Man TV show, who by the end realized how horrific it actually was. But obviously that can't be Ben because he never really liked it. And it can't be Amelia because she admittedly says she doesn't watch that show, really. She's aware of him because she's seen the posters and stuff. But I think you could have made that point if the point that they wanted to go with is that, the violence gets taken more seriously as it gets further on because we're realizing, we're trying to like expose it for the nature of it, to either the people in the movie or at least to us, the audience. But I don't think the intention is to show that the violence is bad. I don't think that is the intention of the movie. While to a general audience, the fact that it is so hyper violent should be a cause for concern, and that should be something that you recognize as being too much violence for sure. By the time we hit the end of the movie, the violence has been used against the system, and I think that's the main point here. Is there's a line where after the deepfake stuff on the plane, we specifically have Ben asking, if you can just fake it, why have the damn show to begin with? Like, why do these people need to actually die? And Killian points out, like, we tried it. We tried to make it all just AI fake the whole way through. For the record, I never said that was the point of the violence. I was just countering what you said about the violence and suggesting what they could have done with it.
I mean, I don't think they need to do anything else, is what I'm getting at here, is that they explicitly say that, like, this is all a thing of humans need to be involved in order for that spark of inspiration, that spark of creativeness. But what I like about where it hits the end is it's because of that human creativeness and all that stuff that the network feels like it should be able to control, but it can't. That's what it gets ending up turned against them. The violence
that's a good point. If the movie actually gave me that point in a way that was satisfying, I think I would love that point. But I don't think it ever hits on it.
Satisfying to me.
I don't think it does. No,
that's where we get at the end. The whole idea that like this violence, this anger that they have managed to stew up in their audience over all these years is now being turned against them because they never expected it would be.
There is a difference between them bringing the idea up and actually executing it in a way that feels satisfying as a story and doesn't feel rushed and feels like that's what the movie was building to the entire time. I don't think it does. I think the script is bad. I don't like. I feel like you keep praising all these ideas, and the ideas are there, but I don't think the actual movie executes them in any way that's remotely satisfying, and that's the big disconnect here.
All right, yeah, I mean that is just agree to disagree, I guess, because I think while it may not have been perfect with it, I do recognize flaws. I think that it did it much better than you're giving it credit for.
All right, David, what are you rating The Running Man out of 10?
I mean, I guess I won't be coy with it. I'm somewhere in the 7s. I know that for sure. And I feel like, I don't feel like that's out of context for what I've been saying about this, but I do feel like it's going to be significantly higher than whatever you're about to say.
What?
So, do I think it's up at the 7.5? No, it's close. It is close for me, but I know that the rating number itself has always been a lot more about like how it is as a movie rather than how it makes me feel. How it makes me feel, it probably got up to the 7.5, a high 7.5 at that. But if I'm looking at this trying to be like objective of like what I think about it from a bottom-up standpoint, I think that it's just a base 7 for me.
Yeah. Just one or two things that we hadn't quite mentioned yet. Amelia did survive by jumping off the plane with a parachute, and also the main hunter was actually the guy who almost won from season 1 of the show. He got to like day 29. They revealed that towards the end. I just wanted to bring those up because I feel like those are the 2 points that people might ask about or mention.
Yeah, they specifically mentioned like season 1 got to day 29 and then he just disappeared. Like, ooh, what happened to him? But
yeah. Anyway, my rating, I think it's a 5 out of 10. I think that's what I'm landing on. It just, obviously, I like a lot of the ideas in it. I think there's potential in a lot of the ideas. But I think the script is woefully inadequate. It spells things out multiple times, even. I think the pacing's not very good. I don't think I feel the tension all that well. And it leaves several sections feeling very rushed, and sections where I can see the potential development of having more time with this character, particularly Amelia in the third act. I'm like, if this was a character who was around and having this slow change where she started to trust and believe in him and like have her mind altered, or not altered in a bad way, just altered in a she's starting to see the propaganda for what it is because she's spending time with another human being and sees that he is just a human being. There's potential there. There's a lot of things they could do with that. They could have done a serious take on The Running Man that would eclipse the original because it'd actually be a seriously good science fiction movie. This, though, kind of wants to be an action blockbuster. It kind of wants to be funny. It wants to be all these things. The tone's all over the place. And the last 10 minutes are absolute dog shit. So, 5 out of 10.
I will say with the Amelia thing, I started making the point before, but we got diverted, is the first two people it introduces are very resolute in their ideals. They're very much people who we as an audience don't expect to and don't need to change. Like, we appreciate the fact that they're introducing this third character who is then the one that we expect as an audience to change. And she does theoretically go through a change over it. I think that's a misstep. I think it is a misstep to have the one that changes is the last one that shows up. You need to have her show up before the resolute characters so that she can be influenced by them.
Yeah. And if you look at the main character and what his changes, I mean, by the end, he's obviously willing to like front this revolution, if you will, but it doesn't feel like the movie leans into that as much as it should throughout the course of his arc to like make that a believable, like this is what it was all about the whole time kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I feel like more so it's the idea that he went into this with the idea of getting payment for his family. He explicitly said he wasn't going to do the Running Man, and then he went back on that. I think by the time you hit the end, he's offered an entire different life for his family, but he turns it down because he's realized like, no, all this should have been for family to begin with. I shouldn't have gone back on my stuff to start with. And that's his evolution, is realizing like the money's never really worth it. It's never, it's you always have to start with family from the bottom up.
I don't think it makes that point very well, but I can see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Also, he thinks his wife and daughter are dead at that point when he's offered that at the end, so it's not really for his family.
But it's something that they wouldn't want him to do, even if he thinks they're dead. It's something where he's like, I shouldn't be.
That's the problem, though, is that there's all these murky like details where I'm like, this doesn't quite add up for me. So anyway, this has went so long in this review, Jesus Christ! And you have to get your homework movie to talk about. So
I'll be quick.
David will do that in a minute. But yes, if you want to support the show and get more episodes in which we may or may not fight, maybe most of the time we don't, but this was a more of a disagreeing episode, you can do that over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership, and you get access to the bonus ratings rundown segment we do for every episode, as well as Collector's Cut. We do it for that show as well, which is the show where we run through like seasons of a subgenre, a director, or a movie franchise, stuff that isn't sci-fi. So you can go check out Collector's Cut as well. But you also get access to the main bonus we do in Patreon, which is the monthly Extra Reel show, where we review some of the worst movies of all time. Most recently, the Amazon War of the Worlds, and stuff like Love and a Leash, stuff like Mac and Me, which is a sci-fi to be fair, but so there is some science fiction-esque stuff on there, but not always.
I like how you say Mac and Me is sci-fi-ish, but you don't count War of the Worlds in there.
I mean, that's true, it is, but I was sort of bringing that up as like a recent one as opposed to whatever.
No, but I agree, it's barely sci-fi. Like it doesn't count.
Yeah. I mean, there's technically aliens mentioned in it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
to some extent. Yeah.
It's more about Amazon Prime making deliveries, but that's okay.
Yeah. That's more important.
So yes, you can go support everything over there. Thanks to everyone who already does support the shows over on Patreon or via YouTube membership. But yeah, like, subscribe, ding the bell, rate us 5 stars, all that usual stuff helps out a bunch as well. So yes, to wrap up the show, David's got his homework movie, where he goes back to a movie that we did on the show before he joined, and just so he can catch up. So, David, what was this week's homework movie?
Well, I was actually thinking, all right, I want to try to fit in the same category. Is there anything else by Edgar Wright? No. So I tried to go Schwarzenegger. I was thinking Total Recall would make sense here, but I'm happy I didn't with how long this went on, because I could not stand another fight about what the end of Total Recall means. So instead, I decided to go something in the dystopian route, and I went with Demolition Man. Okay, all right. So, a couple of similar themes, but it does take a very different route with what its dystopia ends up being. The idea, for anyone unaware, is that in the near future of the 90s then, when everything was on fire and awful in LA, Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes, a criminal and a lawmaker or police officer, they got frozen and sent to the future where everything's nice and bright and wonderful, and
not
no
sent
crime anymore.
To the future. They're just frozen until the future, to be precise.
So they got unfrozen up there. So I think the one thing that I had with this movie going into it is I forgot about what the time frame was. And it took me a long time to get over the fact that this is set apparently 30 years after they got frozen. And I don't know, that it took me a while because that seems way too short. That seems like nowhere near enough time for everyone in society to just be like, and now things are fine.
But they need like an old guy to be like, we need an old-fashioned cop to take down this old-fashioned criminal. Wake up Sylvester Stallone. They need that guy, so it has to be within a lifetime.
You're right. However, they specifically show that guy in the pre-frozen period. I think that guy should have been like just barely out of the academy, tagging along. And then in the future, he should have been like on death's door. He should have been like 70 years has passed here. Instead, it's 30. A bit weird for me. But once I got adapted to that, it's a good action movie. It's got some stuff. I really like the comedy of it. I appreciate how anytime there's cursing, no matter where they are, even if they don't acknowledge it, you just hear in the background the little buzzer go off that tells them like, you've been fined 1 credit for cursing. Like, that's funny in its own right. And then, numerous other technologies. And of course, the 3 seashells. Everyone knows about the 3 seashells. What does that mean?
You really licked his ass.
Yeah. So, no, beyond all that, I enjoyed the movie. I think it was very well done. It does kind of, during the third act, I feel, get a bit too, I'm going to say set piecey. It feels like it's just so focused on like, oh, we have to have all these crazy moving parts and stuff like that, that it kind of loses itself amongst that. But all the build up to it and everything else in there was working fine for me. So overall, I had a fun time with it. I'm going to say it's a 7.5.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. One of the things that I remember we talked about on the show when we did it was that some of the things in this future which are supposed to be bad are actually not bad. They're actually kind of like conservative and like right-wing views. It's like, oh, it's bad that everyone's like, you know, eating healthy and not using diesel and gasoline. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound... I mean, obviously there's like people that are corrupt that are in charge of it all, and that's bad. But it's like some of these things that are technically better are actually just better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like one of my favorite bits is that the franchise wars, the Taco Bell is the only one that's left there. And of course, that's a dystopian nightmare. The idea that like, oh, we only have this one company that's all restaurants and it's Taco Bell. But like they show the actual food there, and I guess it's implied that like, you know, everyone's able to eat. There is this good amount of food going around. So it's not like it's all just literally Taco Bell. It's just kind of the name that's plastered on top, and then the food varies location to location. Well,
when there's no competition, they have to offer everything because they're the only game in town. So it's like, it's a whole thing. Yeah.
My only bit that again, the Hollywoodization, the little thing where it's like, okay, this quote unquote utopia where Sylvester Stallone doesn't like it.
So did you watch this because this is a joke about Arnold being president and that tied into the money?
I didn't. I forgot that was even there.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, hey, check it out. Fits in. But no, at the very end, spoilers mildly, the guy who quote unquote made the utopia ends up dying, and everyone's like, what do we do? How do we survive? And then the people who were living like off the grid are also there like, let's go nuts. Let's go crazy. And Stallone has to come in and be like, no, guys, let's find a middle path that everyone can be happy with. And I'm like, I feel like Stallone would just say, let's go crazy. I don't think we need to have this little hedging our bets here.
It feels like some of the things that it's like, some of the politics in the movie feel a little bit weird, even though I don't think the movie's necessarily trying to say that much. It's just trying to be a fun movie.
Oh, yeah.
But it's kind of weird, like, especially since there's stuff that's a bit more debated hotly now, I think, than it even was at the time. But, it's a fun film. No harm going back to that one. Anyway, there you go. That's the show, everyone. That's the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer ad salsa.